Let's find common ground. Welcome to the podcast. I'm your host, Florian Glatz, founder of Common Ground. And in this podcast, we talk to Francesco Renzi, the founder of Superfluid. Super excited to have you here. Hi, Francesco.
Hey, thanks for the invite. Amazing to be here. Very, very excited.
Same. Please introduce yourself quickly for our listeners who don't know you yet.
Yeah, so I'm Francesco. I'm one of the founders of Superfluid. We are an asset streaming protocol deployed on 8 different EVM networks. Using Superfluid, you can send streams of pretty much any ERC20, and a lot of people are building some really cool stuff on top of us. I've been in the space for about 5 years, and yeah, that's about it.
Before we dive deeper into Superfluid, I agree with you. It's a really awesome application or protocol rather that serves application, also common ground, hopefully in the future. I want to understand a little bit how you actually got into Web3. We have a bunch of listeners who are sort of, thinking about getting into it. So maybe you can share your own story in a few words.
This sounds like a trap. So I just moved to Estonia, and Estonia is this kind of digital country. A lot of tech startups there, and I just moved there. Second day there, I decided to go to a cryptocurrency meetup. Right, this was 2017 in the autumn. Everybody was. I remember I walk into the room and I see everybody's laptops and everybody's got these countdowns. Right. I don't know if you remember, but it was like the period where ICOs did countdowns, right? And there was a countdown and then you had to go and throw your money into the ICO. So there were all these countdowns. Everybody was super excited about, tokens pumping and stuff like that. And the meetup, was full of people trying to sell rubbish, basically, in terms of, bad investments. But then there was one presentation that was really good by this German lawyer who I'm not going to name. And that presentation was really, really, really inspiring. I remember at the end, I asked him for some projects that he would recommend me to check out. He mentioned Kleros, I think TrueBit, some of the more kind of crypto economically secured protocols, right? So it got me down that rabbit hole. And then I got a job and had the luxury to kind of sit around and learn for a long time. Eventually started coding as well, not very well, but kind of enough to understand how to build stuff, and then started to build stuff with my current CTO, and eventually landed on Superfluid. So yeah, Florian was the lawyer at the meetup, so that's how we met in 2017. And yeah, it's been a wild ride since, but yeah, it's amazing because honestly, no one else at that meetup was impressive in any way. So if it weren't for your presentation, I probably would have thought there was, just a bunch of gamblers, because that's basically what it was like. But I think, the people who stick around in the bear markets are people who see past the gambling veneer, right, of crypto. And that's kind of something that, I personally feel like I owe you.
Well, I love the story, so thank you for sharing it. And yeah, it was amazing back then in Estonia. I was giving actually lectures in Tartu to some IT/law students. And then I went to Tallinn to speak at this meetup and meet some people. And so I'm very happy to hear that, sometimes I reach people who then actually get inspired and then become such an amazing founder like you. It's, makes it all worth it. So thank you for sharing. Since you're now the founder of a Web3 company, how much are you actually using Web3 products in your day-to-day life? And feel free to say none if that's, the reality, or, name us a few that you think are already enriching your life. The background of the question is, of course, trying to understand how far are we in this Web3 revolution? Are we actually at a point yet where Web3 helps people in their everyday life? How is it with you personally?
I think that's a really good question, right? And there's a couple of things that are interesting. The truth is, most of crypto right now is still financially oriented. And I don't touch any financial app that often, right? I'm not a gambler. I'm not a trader. Like I don't trade. I don't need to buy or sell stuff every day, right? So you could argue that I use crypto as much as I use fiat or fintechs, right? That said, I do use crypto quite often for angel investments. I use crypto. I mean, I get my salary in crypto and streams, right? But and that happens every second. So technically, I'm always using crypto. I don't actually have to do anything because the streams just run on their own, right? So that kind of depends how you define using Web3. I'd say one of the apps I probably use the most often, which is associated to my wallet, is Lens. I think Lens is really cool. Use that quite often. And I do spend quite a lot of time testing all sorts of stuff that's being built on Superfluid. So any application that's built on us, I'll connect my wallet, test it, and give some feedback to the founders. I do that quite often. So yeah, I mean, I think I could probably use it more, but I definitely feel like I use it quite often.
I love the answer. It's very honest, but also shows that there are real applications for Web3 crypto today. It's basically mostly financial, but you also mentioned Lens, which is a decentralized social graph protocol that allows people to have sort of a Web3 identity. And then there are applications connecting to this identity. There are apps like Twitter. There are other kinds of apps where you can basically have a sort of social experience that uses Web3 identities. And at Common Ground, we're in fact also going to integrate the Lens social graph because it's such an obvious, utility that is provided with these on-chain social graphs that we want to use them as well. I like your answer. Thank you so much. And maybe a last question on this Web3 adoption topic. We're all in the crypto space currently looking, I think, quite enviously at the AI people. They were like, for years, AI was like this, yeah, okay, AI, but what can you do with it? Who has access to this? It's like this dark magic. And now there's ChatGPT and I don't know, a million startups based on ChatGPT. Satya Nadella, the Microsoft CEO, recently was quoted in having said that blockchain needs its ChatGPT moment. Do you have any prediction or gut feeling what will be Web3's ChatGPT moment?
That's such a good question. I actually posed the same question to my team just a few days ago, and more in terms of Superfluid. So the way I think of it is actually OpenAI is actually, or GPT has been around for a while, but then ChatGPT made it so accessible that everybody could go and write something, screenshot it, tweet it, right? And that kind of exploded GPT. But GPT has actually been around for a bit longer, right? So if you think of kind of GPT as the protocol, ChatGPT as the first real app, right? And it's kind of the killer app, maybe it was just the first app, right? Then for Web3, I think it's most likely going to be something social. I think something that because ultimately it's all about virality, right? Like it's all about, like, the only reason we know about this AI stuff is because it lends itself very well to being shared and talked about. So I hope it's something more interesting than monkey pictures. It did look like we had a first go at a bit of a kind of mainstream adoption with the monkey pictures, but hopefully the next round something slightly less about money, right? Because I thought that was ultimately the kind of NFT culture doesn't really vibe with me because it's all about brandsy, like I buy something, I show it off, it's just like I've never really vibed with that.
Social status, basically. Yeah. Mm.
Yeah, I mean, because it's like the problem with that kind of thing is that it works by being exclusive, right? And anything that works by being exclusive will never be fully, like, by definition, not everybody can adopt it, right? Because the whole point is it's exclusive. So I think something that is more inclusive and probably lower friction, less money oriented, like you don't need to spend money to become part of this new thing, will probably be what takes off, right? So it could be somebody figuring out how to make something like Lens fun, for example. Or, it could even be something like WorldCoin, as much as people hate it. And, I personally don't like the orb scanners either, but that kind of thing, does have potential to onboard millions of people, right? but I truly hope it's something that is related to, the financial aspects of crypto. But at the same time, I don't think it's likely to be the case. I think it's much more likely to be
Yeah.
something non-financial. But we'll see. I don't have any good predictions.
But you gave some good sort of, points actually to make predictions on. And I think I would agree. I think there is a limit to how well finance sort of scales, socially speaking. I think a lot of people are just not interested in finance. They don't understand finance. Maybe they even think finance is evil, right? Because money is sort of ambiguous thing that can be great if you have it, but if you don't have it, it feels like an oppressive force in this world.
Yeah.
I also feel like it could be something in the social arena. Obviously, that's why we built Common Ground. That's why we want to make these social graphs on blockchain accessible, like the Lens protocol, but also just token contracts in general, right? Be it monkey picture tokens or be it governance tokens in DAOs, right? Those are all, in a sense, social graphs, which don't really have great applications yet to interact with them and interact with people that are part of this graph. So this is sort of how we look at it at Common Ground. And maybe in the future, it could be something combined. So, I mean, we've talked about Superfluid, how we could integrate it at Common Ground. And what I really love is this idea of, the stream that you've built, the stream protocol. And what we want to do at Common Ground is really make the users the owners of the platform. And I think what inspired me in the conversation that we had is this idea that we could stream sort of the equity of the company to the users while they are using it. So using the app, bringing value to it, actually while you do it, you can see how your share in ownership in this entity increases. I don't know if that is, has the potential to go viral, but it feels mind-blowing to me that this is possible with your application.
I completely agree. I actually want to make maybe not a prediction, but kind of an observation, right? That the kind of long-term objective is to have everyone use blockchain money, right? Blockchain for money, for transactions, for their assets, all that stuff. But the truth is that in order to do that, we need to onboard people to self-custody, and we need to give everyone a blockchain address, right? But once you have that, then using crypto for more and more things becomes more obvious, because I truly believe crypto actually has very good UX. Like the simplicity, like for me to send money to someone in the Philippines is really hard. I was making an angel investment in fiat and I got bounced twice by the bank, right? Like it is actually, like crypto actually has good UX. The problem is the onboarding. And that's why I'm bullish on non-financial use cases, because if you onboard me to use an app that's fun, and then by using that app that's fun, maybe I earn some money, or I earn an NFT that I can sell, or some sort of value accrues to that wallet, then I've basically been onboarded without having to go through the painful steps of on-ramping money, right? Which is something that most people are never going to do, right? Like somebody in a third world country will not put their savings into crypto, right? Like, but if you look at, for example, Axie Infinity, right? Axie Infinity onboarded millions of people in the Philippines who never had to on-ramp, because what they did is they joined the guild. The guild would give them some assets. They would play with those assets and earn more money. So they were using the blockchain to earn rather than using the blockchain to invest, right? And the truth is most people do not have capacity to invest. So if we expect, to onboard billions of people for investment, when most of the people in the world have no money to invest, we're not going to go very far. But instead, if we create mechanisms for those people to adopt Web3 in a playful manner and earn before they're asked to spend, then I think we have a shot at adoption, right? Which is one of the reasons why I'm so bullish on gaming. But I also think things, like you said, social applications where there are things you can do without spending anything, and then eventually by providing value, earn something, are super, super valuable ultimately. And yeah, I mean, obviously that value should be streamed, but don't need to talk my own book all the time.
No, this is genius. And actually, I've never looked at it, I think, in the way you just framed it, but it makes total sense to me that actually, I would agree with you. Crypto has amazing UX once you're in the system, because literally the simplicity of exchanging value is unmatched by any other system of value transfer that we've ever seen in the history of humankind. But getting on ramp is really, really hard. And funny enough, now in the United States, they are shutting down the on ramps to crypto, right? So it's actually getting harder. I've just read the news that major exchanges can't receive wire transfers anymore in the United States. They really want to make it hard. It sort of feels like the US is becoming like Argentina, where they want to make it hard to acquire, to sell your local currency into another currency. And I mean, I think for this reason, exactly this reason, people shouldn't have to on-ramp through, I don't know, bank accounts and exchanges. It should actually them bringing value to a system and being rewarded based on blockchain-based value or coins for bringing this value. Thank you for framing it that way. That even gives me sort of some ideas. That's really
Some
cool.
ideas.
Yeah, some ideas. Let's talk about payments for a moment, because obviously Superfluid is broadly in this realm of payments. I hope I'm not framing it wrong. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that's how I would say it.
If we just say payments, I think the problem, it's true, but people also associate payments with like something really boring. So I kind of want to say it's not just payments. And
cool.
Payments are usually moving money, and Superfluid doesn't necessarily have to move money, right? We don't think of moving other kinds of assets as payments, right? But Superfluid realistically can be used to move any ERC20 style fungible token, right? So it's not necessarily about payments as much as it is about moving fungible value across the blockchain in kind of new and scalable ways. That would kind of be my definition. I actually would add that right now, 80%. No, let's say Ether is money. So 60% of our volumes are not money. As much as we are about payments, most of our volumes are not about money movement. They're about different kinds of tokens, which, the moneyness of those tokens is debatable.
So interesting. And I mean, that's what I love about crypto conversations. You just literally deconstruct any concept that you're traditionally familiar with, like the moneyness of the assets. That's such a beautiful framing. What are non-payment related or non-money related things that people stream with Superfluid? I've seen on your website there a button that says vesting, for example, which seems really appealing. Can you give us some examples and what people are doing with Superfluid?
Yeah, so again, basically what Superfluid allows you to do is stream any ERC20 from one account to another. The stream is perpetual, happens every second. It happens without requiring the user to ever touch the blockchain. So the user opens the stream with one transaction, and then the stream just goes, right? So it's this kind of perpetual movement of funds, which is very fixed in the way it works. But as a result, is also very flexible. So for example, you can send and receive any number of streams at the same time. Those streams are netted between each other in real time. So for example, as you receive your salary, you can send your salary somewhere else, right? So every second you receive it and send it at the same time, and your account doesn't accrue any money because it's kind of, as it receives, it's sending the money forward, right? And by doing that, you can, for example, receive your salary in USDC, but reinvest it in real time into Ether, right? So you can do these kinds of pretty interesting things. So things people are doing with Superfluid. Vesting is a big one. That's obviously not a payment, right? Although it is kind of a payment, but it's not a payment. Depends on how you look at those assets. We have a pretty big contingent of users that use streaming for dollar cost averaging. So as I described, you take your USDC and you stream it to this market, and the market will swap it for a different asset. So for example, USDC, and you buy Ether, or the opposite, right? Maybe you want to divest from Ether, so you will stream Ether and receive a USDC, right? So that's a pretty big contingent. And more recently, we've also started building some integrations in gaming. And the ones in gaming
Yeah,
are
yeah,
pretty exciting. So in gaming,
yeah, yeah.
imagine you have an in-game currency and you stream that to the game to get access to some, special features. In this specific case of the game we integrated most recently, you're basically renting land in the game by streaming the in-game
Yeah,
asset. And by renting that land, you can then stake your NFTs on the land and earn yields. There's a whole kind of game mechanic. But with in-game assets, I get really excited because basically, since we launched that integration, we got 25,000 users to
yeah.
basically start streaming this in-game asset to this contract in the matter of 2 days. And that
That's
just
incredible.
doesn't happen very often for us. Like,
Dude,
so we got very excited
well,
about that. And I
yeah,
started thinking more about gaming. And ultimately, my vision on Web3 gaming is that we're building all this kind of financial and non-financial infrastructure around public-private keys, all this kind of really cool stuff. And we all have this vision of a future where everybody's using crypto for everything, and all of your money is blockchain, and you're using it for all the economies running on the blockchain, right? We all have this vision. But if you kind of drag us back to Earth, we will all admit that it's probably about 20 years away, right? But if you look at an in-game economy, you can
yeah,
design that from scratch to completely use crypto, right?
yeah,
Like
yeah,
you can design a Web3 game with a functional economy, with money moving from A to B to C to D to, wherever, flowing around in different ways. And you can design that fully on crypto rails, right? And that's what a lot of these on-chain Web3 games are doing. And as they redesign those economies, what I'm super excited to do is go in and say, hey, you're designing a new Web3 economy. You should be using streams for all the things where streams make sense, right? So things like rentals, things like income, things like yields, things like taxes, things like, you know, uh, subscriptions, all sorts of kind of recurring payments you should be doing in streams, right? And the truth is it clicks pretty well with game designers because, you want to have a novel, engaging mechanic for your users to play with, right? And
yeah,
it's very easy to build on chain because it's one function call, right? You have a token, and then the same way you would do token transfer, you do token stream, right? It just works incredibly well, and it's very simple to understand, very simple to build with. And as a result, for example, this gaming integration I was talking about before with this game called Planet IX, it took us about a month to set it up, including the contract, the UI, everything, right? And yeah, it's very exciting. I think we're going to start seeing a lot more games, on-chain games, because they're this Trojan horse to onboard users in a fun
yeah,
way, right? And then
yeah,
these people experience crypto in the best way, right? They're earning money instead of spending it, at least until the cost of cards comes down, right? They're learning how the self-custody works. They get to interact with all these primitives. They get to understand how, an NFT exchange works, how Uniswap works, how Superfluid works, all of this to play a game, right? And that's
yeah,
the best way to learn anything, right? Like, how did you learn how to use money? By playing Monopoly, right? It's the
yeah,
same thing, right? And this is kind of the
yeah,
economy of
yeah,
the future that we're building. And instead of onboarding people in a high stakes environment where we ask them to put all their savings into Bitcoin and to only transact with on-chain wallets, instead of doing that, we onboard people with super low stakes environment where they're playing a game, moving around, $20 basically. Occasionally, maybe they get to off ramp something and, be happy about it. And in the meantime, they get to experience all these things, and maybe something will stick. Maybe they will
yeah.
eventually move their savings into crypto. Maybe they will start thinking, hey, maybe I should get paid every second that I work. There's a lot of opportunities, in my
100%,
opinion.
right? There's even this idea that I've heard years ago already is that, when you've designed a sophisticated in-game economy, at some point you can turn this in-game economy just into a real economy, right? Just like flipping a switch, right? It's been a game up until now, but suddenly it's not just a game anymore. The money or the assets from this game are suddenly, real in a sense. And I think with crypto, that's always possible because every asset can be freely transferred. And so
Exactly.
if there is a market for it, right, you can stop maybe paying your rent with it, or I don't know, and there are so many options. Um, but then maybe throwing a little wrench in this vision. Um, some critics of the crypto future that we're envisioning are actually criticizing, I think, exactly this element that gets us excited, which is this. They call it the hyper financialization of the world, right? This vision where everything you do, you always have, sort of a stream visible of some resource being taken away from you or you earning it. And everything suddenly becomes oriented on exactly those metrics. We've seen, some awful, I think, visions presented by in one Black Mirror episode some years ago, where everything is about social status, right? I see someone and then I immediately rate them. Those
Yeah.
kinds of interactions. Do you ever think about this, or is this something that you are, concerned about? That you're sort of, building. I mean,
Never
I
had
find
not.
I've tested Hyperfluid, also Superfluid, also with you, and I find it's so compelling to see how this amount increases. It's gamified in a deep, deep way, and I think the human psychology is triggered by this. Are you afraid sometimes that you're building sort of the atomic bomb sort of
No,
hyper
no.
financialization?
I think, I actually think that that is a very flawed view. Um, like it's not something I think about too often, so my thoughts on this might not be completely kind of thought through. But generally speaking, I think there's a big divide between people with assets and people without assets, right? People without assets tend to rely on income. People with assets generally, have sufficient assets to not need to rely on income, right? And the truth is that what the blockchain technology does very well is creating new assets, right? When you play a game and get an NFT, that is an asset, right? And most people never have assets. Like if you think of someone in a third world country, they work all their life for minimum wage, they never have anything. They never have a house, they never have a car, they never have anything, right? They're literally living, what's the expression, hand to mouth, right? And what crypto does very well is creating assets. And I think creating assets is a way that helps people who otherwise don't have assets to achieve some semblance of financial opportunity, right? Because assets are ultimately the way you achieve financial freedom, right? In a very broad sense, right? Like financial freedoms usually, I'll buy a house, passive income, blah, 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 right? Those things are the only way you can achieve that is through assets, right? Now, I'm not saying that NFTs are going to save the world, right? But I do think that allowing people to create smaller assets and reducing the friction that goes into making things of value and allowing people to have those and use them in a financial sense will allow for people to have greater access to finance. And, you can call that hyper financialization if you want, but if that's what you call it, then I think hyper financialization is a great thing because you're basically giving people who never had access to finance, right? While at the moment, access to finance is basically only for people who actually have things, right? Like if I told you get a loan, right? Yeah, sure. You have a house, you have a car, you're well off, you'll get a loan, right? But if you go and ask someone who only has an income to get a loan, they're gonna, if they're lucky, get a very bad loan, right? So I
Yeah.
think helping, basically creating more assets allows more people to have assets, and allowing more people to have assets allows more people to access better loans because they have assets to secure those loans. As much as,
Uh,
again, sounds aspirational to think that NFTs will turn into collateral that people can use to improve their lives. I truly believe that. And I think it's a very kind of privileged view to think that that is a joke or a game, right? Because we've
uh,
read the stories of people in the Philippines literally earning money from Axie Infinity, right? And what that
uh,
is literally a game producing assets out of nowhere which create wealth for people who would otherwise be less well off, right?
Ah,
And, I think if you extend that to more applications, it could be games, it could be social apps, it could be, maybe somebody starts earning appreciation points on some social app of the future, and that actually improves their life, right? For whatever reason. So, basically, I think hyperfinancialization, if that's the name we want to use, is probably a good thing. And the people who are criticizing it haven't thought through the fact that the way rich people get rich is by having access to finance, and hyperfinancialization is giving that access to more people, which is
and
probably a good thing.
that's an interesting take, and I think I agree with many things that you said. I think what you didn't really touch upon, but we don't have to go deeper into this, is this, psychological aspect of sort of hyper focus on finance, right? So, is the salvation a hyper focus on finance, or is is the salvation, in a sense, to broaden access to financial opportunities, right? It's not necessarily the same thing, I would say, right?
I don't know. I don't know. As I said, it's not like something I've thought through too much.
Yeah,
I generally think
yeah,
it's going to happen, whatever we do. So all we can do is kind of build the best tools and imbue them with some sort of values that we think are the right ones.
Let's talk about a different topic, which is top of mind for many people at the moment, which is security in Web3. We've seen a major hack with Euler, they call it. Euler Finance recently, I think they lost, I don't know how many hundreds of millions in a hack. I think some or all of the money was returned by now, which is great to hear. But overall, Web3 is still sort of, it has a reputation for being hacked one way or another. I think the last 2 years also gave a lot of evidence for that, where people were able to exploit things. What is your perspective with, building a protocol that is obviously touching sort of exactly those sensitive topics? Is there a solution to this problem of security, or is it just, trial and error? Do we need, I don't know, formal verification? Do we need insurance? What is the way forward to actually, make Web3 so secure that we can tell literally millions of billions of people, actually put your life savings on the blockchain? You have, access to more opportunities that way, and there is not the downside of getting hacked. What's this a way forward there?
Yeah, that's honestly the hardest question. I'd say there's no wrong approach, and it's always going to be a multi-pronged, approach between things like formal verification, auditing, insurance, everything you mentioned, I think has its own merits. None of them work in isolation, right? So like a holistic approach to security is the only way. But the truth
Yeah,
is, what I've seen so far is there's nothing you can do to completely sleep at night except for time passing. Like the only thing
and
that seems to show that something doesn't have any holes is just time passing and no leaks appearing. And
and
that is a very hard thing to digest as a startup founder because you don't have the luxury of time, right? Like I can't wait 2 years before I let my users be secure, right? So that's why so many people invest so much money in security, because obviously you want to cut that time down. But I I personally think that all the industry has to do is survive long enough for that perception of security to improve. And the other thing that I think is very important, and I hope, as an industry, we can always keep in mind, is that the way things were solved in traditional finance are not going to work for us. And we shouldn't make the mistake of trying to adopt them. Adopting security practices that worked for traditional finance is a shortcut that will not work. And just to give a couple of examples there, right? Let's say, for example, in payments, right, which is something I kind of think more often about, right? The concept of a chargeback is basically this concept that I pay you, right, for something, but you don't get the money until a certain period has passed. And then if I change my mind, I can kind of take that money back and say it was a scam. And maybe it was a scam. But the point is, when I said I gave you money, I didn't actually give you money. Right? There's an intermediary. There's a lot of time wasted, a lot of capital inefficiency, a lot of, insecurity on your end. And the worst part is that this intermediary also will penalize you if there's a chargeback. So, I've seen these crazy stories of, a merchant getting a payment and then the payment getting charged back and the merchant having to pay a fine to the intermediary. So not only did they not make the money, but they also had to pay extra on top of that. And this is just a terrible system, right? It's obviously a terrible system because basically what it's giving is a ton of insecurity around everything, while, not necessarily solving the problem, because it doesn't, there's no guarantee that the chargeback is not a griefing attack from my end, right? So basically, and you listen to a podcast and there's these people that work in fintech that are like, oh, crypto payments are never going to make it until we get chargebacks, right? And that is just so annoying. That's like a horse guy saying, oh, cars are never going to make it until they have better saddles, right? And I'm like, you don't get the point, right? We have to develop better security practices rather than the same security practices, because the medium is different, right? The way the technology works is different and the solutions are not going to look the same, right? And I'm not saying I have the answers. I'm just saying adopting the same solutions is not going to work and is going to basically inherit. That's the thing, right? It inherits the slowness. So let's say we adopt chargebacks. Well, suddenly crypto doesn't settle instantly anymore, right? And, what do you call a system that doesn't settle instantly? TradFi, right? So I'll give you one example, right? One thing that, in my opinion, for example, does improve security is streaming. Okay, not to kind of, talk about Superfluid, but if you think about it, if instead of sending you $1,000, I open a stream to you, which will transfer $1,000 over 2 days, right? That gives me a ton of time to make sure that that is correct while still giving you the security that that payment is in fact happening, right? And, I literally just came up with that, but I'm just saying there's better solutions and we should try and avoid adopting the things that made TradFi work so badly, right? Which obviously, the delays in settlement are one example, chargebacks are another example, but also things like KYC and AML are another example, right? Those are patchwork solutions that don't actually solve any problems, and adopting them in Web3 does not take us anywhere because ultimately they slow down technological solutions that could, solve the problem. I don't know if I'm making sense, but basically what I'm trying to say is new technology needs new solutions, and any regulation that is prescriptive in the way way problems need to be solved ends up ruining the opportunity to actually solve the problems with a better technical solution.
It reminds me heavily of what the EU has done at the moment in the Data Act, where they have created a provision that says smart contracts need essentially a stop routine embedded in them, such that at any moment in time, the operator of the smart contract can halt all, interactions with a smart contract. Basically making this concept of unstoppable, finance, unstoppable smart contracts completely void, right? Where you're really thinking like, how did you come up with that, guys? That's such a bad idea.
typical regulator mentality, right? It's you have your solution, and your solution is obviously the best because we have it, right? We don't have another one. We have this one, but it doesn't apply to this new technology. It doesn't have intermediaries. How can we apply all this intermediary-based solutions to a technology that doesn't have intermediaries? Well, obviously, we need to introduce intermediaries, right? It's just like the whole point was to avoid the intermediaries, right?
I think from a legal perspective, the problem is that, every every contract has two phases. There is the phase of, primary exchange of services, but then there is the second phase of, oh, well, the services rendered actually were flawed. And now I want some money back in what I paid for these services, things like this. And in a crypto system where everybody's sort of anonymous, you don't really know your counterparty. How do you do this, right? I think this is sort of a problem that is so far unsolved. And I think I've probably talked about that already back in 2017. It's like, how do you actually implement a system for parties of a contract to be able to claim, their legal rights in case a contract doesn't perform as expected, right? So I think that's a potential issue that is sort of framed. You can frame it as chargebacks and credit cards, like, hey, actually, my wallet was hacked. I didn't want to spend that money. Can I have it back? And I know on Twitter, people are like, hey, my NFTs were stolen. They are currently being listed at OpenSea. OpenSea, can you please stop trading of this asset? And then if you're lucky, OpenSea stops it. And then I've even seen it happen that sometimes people buy NFTs that were stolen and give them back to the person that they were stolen from, and these sort of random acts of kindness. But that's not really a systemic solution, right? And the legal system at least had a solution for this. And I think in crypto right now, we're very heavily relying on this, sovereignty narrative, on this, instant settlement narrative, which is great if things work out as intended. But if they don't work out as intended, we have seen the crypto people also scream for lawyers and courts to settle things. And then, how do you do it, right? So you can't have it both ways. I think that's sort of an open issue.
I think, as I said, I don't think I'm not saying these aren't problems. I'm just saying that there are always better solutions.
Francesco, thank you so much for being with us today. This was an extremely interesting conversation. Some really good points raised. I wish you good luck with Superfluid. I hope we see each other in the next bull market, happily integrating each other and, rocking the next generation of crypto applications. Thank you for being with us today. It was amazing.
Yeah, thanks for the invite, and I hope we can onboard the next billion users together, hopefully on common ground and Superfluid.